sunshine that has brightened our pathway wide. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember the Red River Valley who has loved you so true. For a long time, my darling, I have waited for the sweet words you never would say. Now at last, all my fond hopes have vanished, for they say that you're going away. Of the valley you're leaving, oh how lonely, how drear it will be. Do you think of the kind heart you're breaking and the pain you are causing to me? Come and sit by my side if you love me. Not hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember the Red River Valley and the one who has loved you so true. Home by the ocean, may you never forget those sweet hours that we spent in the Red River Valley, and the love we exchanged with the flowers. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Not hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember the Red River Valley and the one who has loved you so true.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining me on today's 172nd Air Wing video. Hopefully this video finds you in good spirits this Christmas, or whatever Christmas you happen to be watching this video in the year that you're tuning in. So as of the time of this video, I'm making this in proximity to Christmas of 2022. So happy holidays and happy new year to those of you who celebrate such things in whatever way that your culture does so. With that established, we'll move right into the subject at hand. And usually I don't start these videos with an apology, but today's example forces me to do that. You see, those of you that have subscribed to my channel for some time know that I mentioned in my first F-105 video that I was going to be publishing a follow-up with the two-seat F-105F flown by Major Leo Thorsness and Captain Johnson, which is of course this release, and I just never got around to it. So I have to explain that a little bit, and I'll do that by opening with my general, I should say maybe policy of how I make my videos. Usually when I order a model, I generally try to get a video published within proximity of its release. And I do this because I'm just not a personal fan of publishing content for unattainable models. It's just I don't like it. I don't like doing that. It sends a bad experience for somebody when they tune into a video and they see a model review and they think, oh wow, yeah, I got to get that, and then they hop on their retailer or whatever outlet they want to look at on the secondary market, and yeah, it's either sold out or there's limited supply left and the price is high, or the only place to get it is from some secondhand dealer who's selling it for some really insane amounts of money. That's just not an experience I like to set people up for. As time has gone on, I've come to understand that to some extent this is unavoidable. With enough time, basically everything gets scarce in the model world because they only make a certain number of these, and then once they're sold out, which may take months, but once they're sold out, and then the price inevitably goes up as people discover them and want to buy them, and they can't because the release has been sold out at most of the retailers. So I realize this is not something that's avoidable long term, but in the short term, I like to release videos of models that people can actually watch within close proximity of the upload date, and they can go shop and find it and order it and not have to deal with some extraordinarily high prices. I don't like setting people up for that experience if I can avoid it. So when I made that commitment, I had taken unexpectedly early delivery of the Megan Flanagan F-14 release, and I thought, well, given the timing of when that one was released and the general popularity of F-14s, plus the fact it's Slick Flanagan. I mean, this is a pretty historic pilot, the last female aviator to fly the F-14 and so forth. So I thought it wise that I get that video turned around and published first, because that review would be relatively close to when the release is available in stores, and people wouldn't get given a unfortunate experience if they watch the video 2 or 3 months later, like now, and then they can't get it because it's sold out. So I put this one on the back burner after that one, and then I got my other releases that came through, and to be honest, 2022 was a bit of a mess logistically with some of my models coming in. As many of you have probably experienced yourselves, the logistics and shipping and everything has still been very disrupted because of the coronavirus situation. So pre-orders and shipments and delays and lags and packaging issues and Brexit for some of you UK and European members and subscribers, it's all led to a bit of a mess in terms of getting a hold of stuff in a reasonable amount of time. So now, we're months, almost 2023, and I'm finally getting around to doing this F-105 video, which I committed to doing closer to the summer of this year. So apologies for waiting. I know you F-105 fans don't have a lot of content on this legendary and historic aircraft, but I had to prioritize certain ones to get them out first. So again, people didn't get, they were waiting 2 or 3 months to get an F-16 review or an F-14 review, and then they're sold out, and then people are justifiably unhappy at that outcome. So with this one, I'm glad to say that this release is still relatively easy to acquire. They're not necessarily affordable anymore. I think they're about $145 at the time of this publication. So you can still get these, and that was one of the reasons why I deprioritized it, because I thought, hey, if it's between an F-105 and an F-14 model, I can probably wait on the F-105 model, publish this video later, and people can still shop and get a reasonable deal on it without losing their shorts on the price. So now I'm able to deliver it. And so we will shift to talking about the aircraft at hand. This is the F-105F in the 355th Tactical Fighter Wing colors of the 357th Tactical Fighter Squadron. This one was flown by pilot at the time, Major Leo Thorsness, and Captain Harold Johnson out of the Southeast Asian Theater, Korat, Thailand in 1967. So to understand just how influential and how important this particular release is, we have to talk about some things here. So if you look at this model, you may notice that there are some markings over here and then a couple of airplane marks on the side. And this is going to tie directly into what we're going to talk about today, about the history of this airplane and why this release is so special. So In April 1967, the first generation of what we now know as the Wild Weasel mission came up. So the story behind this is covered elsewhere on other channels like 10% True and various other aviation outlets. So if you do want to explore this subject more, I do recommend that you do so. But in summary, in 1965, the first U.S. Air Force F-4 Phantoms were shot down by SA-2 guidelines, or as known by the manufacturers, S-75 DIVNA surface-to-air missiles. So the first generation of guided ground-to-air weaponry was introduced in Vietnam, and the background behind how all this happened to me is actually its own story in and of itself, because for a long time the U.S. Air Force knew this was a threat. They knew when Francis Gary Powers U-2 was shot down over Soviet Union during a reconnaissance flight by that very same weapon system. However, between early 1962 and 1965, no action was taken against the SA-2 batteries in North Vietnam, despite extensive reconnaissance and analysis showing that the sites were under construction. It was the belief of the civilian establishment that attacking those sites represented an unacceptable risk of attacking Russian advisors, which then would have escalated the war, and that was something that Lyndon Baines Johnson was more afraid of than defeat. So the sites were not attacked, and further, the U.S. Air Force was not going to press the issue much, because the surface-to-air missile was not only a threat to airplanes, it was also a threat to the Air Force budget. The Air Force was trying to get originally the Eisenhower and then finally the Kennedy administration to sign off on the XB-70, a high-speed strategic bomber, and the implication of the S-75 weapon system being a threat to that would have obviously taken the wind out of those sails pretty quickly. It didn't help that the XB-70 was a very, very expensive program. So because of these political machinations, the Air Force brass was, shall we say, disincentivized to really take mobilized action against the S-75 situation until a series of F-4s were shot down over Vietnam in 1965. Rapidly, the Wild Weasel 1 program was stood up, which involved F-100s, which is a story that I'll probably cover in a different date and time. Hopefully one of these years somebody will release an F-105F Wild Weasel model. I haven't seen one yet in 1/72nd, and my modeling skills are not... I'm just not comfortable doing one of those in Southeast Asian camo that would do it justice. But that's the release I hope to see someday from somebody. Maybe Panzerkampf, because they seem to be on this really good trend of releasing models nobody else has touched. Anyways, the Wild Weasel 1 program was stood up using F-100F Super Sabres, two-seat versions. Some radar and homing detection gear was basically jury-rigged into the aircraft. They were sent off to Vietnam on very short and very classified notice, and the SAM hunting mission was born. So what the F-105 here does, the two-seat version, is first of all, you notice that compared to the single-seat one that I reviewed last time, there's a second crew cabin here. And the idea is the pilot will fly the aircraft while the radar and weapons systems officer, in this case Harold Johnson, would work the radar detection gear, the antennas, the guidance and homing gear, and SAM hunting equipment to locate, find, and kill the surface-to-air missile site. Remember back in 1967, surface-to-air missiles were not mobile. Actually, I think the mobile versions were in development at that point and would be first introduced in the Middle Eastern theater in 1973. So at this point, surface-to-air missiles are big, smoky, huge fixed installations. Now, of course, the North Vietnamese did camouflage them. However, the camouflage didn't defeat the radar emissions of the sites. So they could be tracked, and they could be engaged, and they could be killed. In the way that the Air Force crews would do this is they would use either guided missiles such as these AGM-45s on the rail, or they would use good old-fashioned Triton all-explosive right down here. So that was the mission that at the time Major Leo Thorsness and Captain Johnson had on 1967. They flew the real aircraft, the F-105, on a SAM hunting mission, and the goal was to take out the sites and keep them off the air while the F-105 bombers would hit their assigned target. In that day's case, they were attacking a barracks in North Vietnam. So during one of these missions, Thorsness flew lead on Kingfisher flight. Kingfisher 1 was this F-105 with serial number ending in, take a look at my notes here, serial number ending in 8301. They were lead for Kingfisher flight while they worked a regular, shall we say, anti-SAM sweep. So the anti-surface-to-air missile mission was to go ahead of the strike package, engage any surface-to-air missile sites, and extract once the strike package had dropped their bombs and left. But as the saying goes, the plans of mice and men sometimes go awry, and so it was on the 19th of April. So the first thing that happens is the North Vietnamese scramble MiG-17s to intercept the F-105s. So for those of you who may not know, the MiG-17, very much compared to an F-105, is an itty-bitty little airplane. It's tiny, and it turns really mean. There are air show videos on YouTube that I highly recommend that you watch because they really tell the story of how maneuverable they are more than I can. Suffice it to say that the big, lumbering, huge Mach 2 sled F-105s were not a match for a MiG-17 in a turning fight. So the North Vietnamese dispatched 4 MiG-17s to intercept the F-105 Weasel flight. Unfortunately, during an air-to-air engagement, Kingfisher 03 was shot down by a MiG-17. So when this happens, for those of you who haven't seen my A1 Skyraider video that I uploaded previously, somebody, generally one of the flight mates involved, will orbit whoever gets shot down in the crash site, and they'll do what's called Rescue Combat Air Patrol, or RESCAP. And this task involves flying over the area of the downed aviators and coordinating search and rescue, getting the helicopter and escort airplanes into the area, telling the rescue crew where to go, and then covering the aviators to make sure that any enemy activity is suppressed until the aviators are rescued. So during this flight, Leo Thorsness and Johnson both were flying this F-105 and flew cover for their down flight mate. The other 2 F-105s withdrew from the theater, both of them essentially claiming damage. One had a afterburner malfunction and returned to base. The other one was engaged by a MiG-17 and extracted with battle damage, so that just left Kingfisher lead, Thorsness and Johnson to coordinate the rescue. While this was going on, 2 A-1Es and a helicopter were scrambled to go pick up the downed aviator. A fresh set of MiG-17s were scrambled to stop this, at which point Thorsness engaged one of those MiG-17s. And by engaging the MiG-17, he snuck behind the airplane and hosed it down with 20mm cannon fire, leading to the first kill here. So after that engagement, he came across a second MiG-17 that was trying to get near the crash site of his flight mate. And as a result of this, the second MiG was hit, but there was no gun camera footage confirming the downing, and generally with air-to-air kills in Vietnam for the U.S. to confirm it, it wasn't enough just to say that you shot down a MiG. There had to either be gun camera footage or some other aircraft in the vicinity who could get on the radio and officially confirm that, yes, Pilot X shot down MiG Y at date Z. So given the nature of combat, confirming a kill is kind of difficult because there's the preoccupation with trying to keep yourself alive in the process. So sometimes sticking around to get a confirmed kill is not an advisable thing for one's survival. So with Thorsness being one of the few airplanes in the vicinity to lend support to the downed aviators, this F-105 crew elected to leave bravely once they hit the other MiG and they were not able to get a confirmed kill, which is why on the side here you will see that there is a half MiG painted right there. By most accounts, based on the published source material from reading the book Going Downtown, as well as Ed Rasmus's writings, it looks like this was pretty much 99% confirmed. However, the North Vietnamese did not agree to the claim. Now, that it should be made clear, of course, that this doesn't necessarily mean that the American side is exaggerating. in warfare, usually whoever loses an air-to-air engagement generally pretends it never happened. So there's not many parts of the first Top Gun movie that are accurate, but the part where the country that lost those MiG-28s says it never happened, that part's pretty accurate. So when the second MiG was hit, as Thorsness and Johnson were busy dealing with that threat, two of the other MiG-17s unfortunately engaged the Sandy, the A-1s, which were scrambled to go cover and pick up the survivor. And one of those A-1s were shot down. The other A-1 was on the radio for help. Four other F-105s that were low on fuel left the tanker and went to render assistance, even though their fuel gauges were not in a condition where they could have done that well. So they came into the theater of engagement with Leo Thorsness and Johnson both flying on fumes, and tried to render assistance for the A-1, which was dealing with three MiG-17s trying to shoot them down. So pretty handful fight going on right here. And after all this is going down, as noted, Thorsness and Johnson are taking a look at their fuel gauges, and there's not much in the tank left after all this maneuvering. The F-105 is a very big airplane. It's got a big old J75 engine, and that big old engine guzzles down a lot of gas. So they left the scene of operations, went to meet up with the tanker, and they came across another set of F-105s that had been trying to cover the rescue, which was aborted because basically there was too much enemy activity. So the survivors were unfortunately not recovered at the scene, but with Thorsness at the tanker and another four F-105s, all of whom are low on gas, Thorsness and Johnson looked around at the situation and decided that since there wasn't enough fuel to top off all of the F-105s at once from the tanker, they would leave the boom and cycle off so that the other F-105s, who were critically low on gas, could get fuel and stay in the air. So this meant that when Thorsness and Johnson left the tanker, they had to point their nose toward Korat. Actually, I believe at this point they had to go to Uban because they didn't have the gas to go to Korat. They had to point their nose toward Korat, climb to 35,000 feet, and then glide back to base because they didn't have any gas. And as the story goes, when they landed, they only had enough fuel to keep the engine running long enough to make it to the runway. As soon as they turned off the runway to go to the taxiway, the engine shut down from fuel starvation. So, because of all these events in one afternoon, Thorsness was advanced for recommendation for the Medal of Honor, and he received that award. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after all of these events, he was shot down on a different mission by a MiG-21 from the North Vietnamese, and himself was captured and taken prisoner at the Hoa Lo prison, better known by the tagline Hanoi Hilton. So he did win his medal, however, he didn't collect it for quite some time afterward. So with that story concluded, we can talk a little bit about the model finally, huh? So this F-105 is a really good release. I think the colors look pretty good. The Southeast Asian color scheme is apparently a bit of a controversy on the forums, but I don't have an issue with the way this one's done. So the markings, the small marks, the labels, panels, some of the warnings labels on the side, as well as the fuse detail on the bombs and the ordnance is done really well. HobbyMaster can be a little inconsistent with that, but with this release, they've done a really good job. The small marks, as well as the serial number on the side here of the tail, are done really well. And I do like the fact that the kill insignias for each of these missiles, standing for a SAM site destroyed, as well as the MiGs down there, are done really well. And the cockpit lettering, which you see for Leo Thorsness's and Harold Johnson's seat there, are all nice and clear. So personally, I think it's a really good release. Do note that as it comes out of the box, the F-105 is a very big airplane. It's about as long as an F-111. So if you're looking at collector space for one of these, just be advised you will need a lot of room to do it. This is probably about a good it's a few inches longer than an F-14, so just bear that in mind when you're shopping for one of these. So yeah, it is a pretty sizable model, and overall I think HobbyMaster did a pretty decent job. So good points. The canopies actually come straight out, so you just take your thumbs and just push these out, and they come right out of a little pole in a socket, so they fit really well. You can get the pilots in and out relatively easily, or I should say pilot and weapon systems officer. You can get them out and into the airplane relatively easily. With some airplanes and how their cockpits are designed, it's a tougher ask than others. Putting figures into the F-14, a lot of fun, let me tell you. And you should try doing it frequently for these videos. It's a lot of fun working with tweezers to get the Rio in the back of one of those F-14s on some of these models. But with the F-105, it's very simple. So I do like how HobbyMaster implemented that. The horizontal stabilizers in the back right here do move, so you can position those however you see fit. And as you may have noticed in some of the intro shots, the afterburner / speed brakes are interchangeable. So you get two pieces in the box. One piece will have the afterburner in the closed position, or I should say normal position. The other will have the afterburner pedals open, signifying their use as dual use speed brakes. So the afterburner pedals would stay closed when the airplane is flying and doing its thing. Then when it's time to slow down and the pilot puts out the speed brakes, then the pedals open up like a flower. It's a pretty cool feature, and I'm glad HobbyMaster modeled it. The landing gear as well, it's in terms of detail, it's done pretty nicely. One of the cons though is that the landing gear tires are a little narrow relative to the actual airplane, which I think if they put fatter tires on this one, I think it would have helped one of the other issues that this model has, which is that it's not the most stable on its landing gear. Landing gear tends to shift when you display it with the gear down and you put it on your shelf. But again, this is, in HobbyMaster defense, a really heavy and really big model. It's a chunky girl, and just like the real life airplane, it's a big one, and you gotta respect that. So I'm not sure it's a problem that they could probably solve in an airplane of this design. The real life aircraft blew tires pretty easily, so you know, hey, it is what it is, I guess. So pros, I think it looks really good. Just be aware too that I did put some weathering on this one, so when you get it out of the box, it will be museum specification clean. Just for my personal preference, I like a little weathering on combat airplanes. Because in real life, museum clean is not what they look like when they're in the theater of battle. And this airplane definitely has a story of being in the theater of battle, so I weathered it appropriately. Users can decide appropriately on how you want to display yours. So for ordnance, you do get a center line, which has 6 500-pound bombs. You can also do a centerline fuel tank. You get two. So you have one fuel tank that just sits on the bottom there, and you have another fuel tank with a slot that allows the included HobbyMaster stand to work. Just as a reference, I do use caliber wing style router stands with my videos. Just makes it easier to get camera shots and angles. It's not that I have a problem with the HobbyMaster stands. It's just for getting consistent shots and getting the camera where I need it to go. The router style stands tend to be a little more convenient for me in that regard. So just understand that when you're watching some of my videos. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other ordnance too. You do get a pylon here, which has either one Shrike air-to-ground anti-radiation missile, or you can get a pylon that has two, which you see right here, one for each side of the wings. So you can get a total of 4 air-to-ground anti-radiation missiles. You see here we have the external fuel tanks. You get 2 on each side, plus an external fuel tank on the bottom if you so choose. And just bear in mind that while these airplanes did have an internal fuel tank in real life, that's not modeled because obviously it's internal, so you would never see the internal bomb bay opened or manipulated with, so that's just closed. But just do be aware that there is an internal fuel tank on the F-105s as well, just in case that comes up for mention. So overall, I think it's a really well done model. I like the fact that HobbyMaster is taking the time and effort to reproduce these, especially in 1/72nd scale, because I think in 1/48 this thing would be an absolute beast. I will say too that one of the things I have done is I have painted the insides of the intakes black. And this is a detail that I'll just mention. I don't know if it's necessarily a pro or a con for some people, but you should just know that HobbyMaster does not paint this black. The insides of the intakes are left in Southeast Asian color. So this side is green. The other side, the other intake over here is going to be tan. So when you look at it head on in the sun, you're just gonna see tan, or you're gonna see green right here, which to me is not it's not a good look that I like, so I painted that black. These intakes go from here and then route into the engine bay where they feed air into the monstrous J75 Pratt & Whitney turbofan. For a long time, this was actually the most powerful single engine tactical fighter plane ever built until the advent of the F-35. So it kept that record for a long time, and the F-105 kept that record for a reason. So it's a big airplane, and just be aware that if you do want to display this one, you're going to need some space on your shelf to do it. So with that, again, I do recommend that you pick this up if you're a fan of the F-105 or the history behind it, and you're supporting of the Medal of Honor winner and how Leo Thorsness definitely earned his medal. And I feel kind of bad that Captain Harold Johnson didn't really get any awards. I didn't see anything in the written record in any of the books on what awards that Captain Harold Johnson should have gotten, and that's the radar weapons systems officer in the back, which anyways, I'm a veteran and I got my own opinion on the political nature of the military award system and what a joke I think that is, but that is definitely a subject for a different video and a different day. So on that note, thank you for watching, and if you've subscribed and at any point in my channel, I want to extend my heartfelt thank you. Thank you for the support. And if you are somebody who likes my videos and other videos of this kind, I do recommend that you, or just advise that you can subscribe. This way you'll be aware when I release new content, which I plan to do throughout 2023. So lots of new and cool kit coming in. I've got the boxes loaded up here, and I'll be shooting some videos throughout 2023. So keep your eyes open for upcoming uploads, and thank you all for your support and watching my videos. So with that, I will leave you with well wishes for Christmas and New Year's, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching.